I don't see how streamlining the service and making it into a one box fits all system is going to make it fair for everybody. One of the things that's coming in is there's been a lot of talk in regards to safe countries. And one of the things that I've said and that other people have said is, well, how are you defining safe? And the example I keep going back to is Ghana is classed as a safe country, but try and be gay there and see how far it gets you. So this idea that someone is coming from a safe country and it's therefore okay to deny their asylum system, in the idea of streamlining these services, I personally do not think is going to work, and I do not think it's fair.
It does appear that the threshold for not necessarily safe countries here, but for example, one of the elements of this EU Migration Pact will be a border procedure. And this is when asylum applicants that are coming from a country where the rate of granting international protection is 20% or lower, or an applicant who's known to have misled authorities by destroying or disposing of a travel document, they will have to have their applications processed in a 12-week time frame. That is from initial decision to the appeal to decide whether they have to be returned to their country of origin or not. The last couple of years alone, we still have 33,000 pending cases in Ireland. Surely this is a common sense move.
You'd think so, yes, but again, this is again looking at this whole streamlining process in that you take Ghana as example, and they're only going to be doing 20% of applications from that country. Well, how are you judging what's relevant and what's not? Somebody who's fleeing, say, like someone, a very straightforward case is someone who is gay, who has been in a loving, committed relationship with someone of the same sex that they're being persecuted for. That's a very, very open and understood from a Western perspective that, yeah, that is something you grant protection for. But what if it's someone who's fleeing, say, something like tribal instances of violence, which happens, or they've got together with someone from the wrong system or the wrong tribe or a different family or things like that. And there is an argument that says, why can't they just go to another place further off in Ghana? But you can still be found there, is the issue. So again, it's this talk of streamlining, and I think one of the issues is that it's pulling an awful lot of the individual nuance of people's cases out of the equation. And that, I think, is where we're going to start seeing massive, massive pitfalls and probably inconsistencies as well.
And I think, look, what the government will say here is that, and the rate for granting asylum applications from Ghana is between 5 and 10%. So that would be a country that would fall into that category. But I think what the government will say here is that as part of the EU Migration Pact, there is a 7-day targeted screening procedure, which will involve fingerprinting, identity checks, photos. Your travel will be scrutinised. Your method of travel to Ireland will be scrutinised by interviewers, which is a lot to do with the current process, but you will have that 7-day targeted time. This will be carried out by the Department of Justice. There's going to be staff there from An Garda Síochána, from the HSE, the Department of Social Protection. The Legal Aid Board will also be there to provide free legal counsel to asylum applicants. In this case, they will be on site to do that. But is that a positive move? We have a national screening centre now. We're targeting a 7-day turnaround. We have a lot of experts, the government at least is going to say, will be there to help fast track the asylum process. The free legal counsel as well. Does that sound like it can be robust enough to make accurate decisions within the 12-week period?
On the surface, yes, especially if you've got all of these organisations working together. However, just to give Legal Aid Board as an example, because I work quite closely with the Legal Aid Board is currently swamped. It's absolutely drowning in the number of applications and appeals that are currently going through because they don't have enough resources, or they're not being allocated enough resources to deal with this sheer number of applications. So, for instance, Daragh, one of the things that's happened is that the appeals process, the number of appeals in Ireland has jumped from 5,000 to 19,000. And part of that is because of they've started to implement these fast-track turnarounds. You can't remove someone's right to appeal, so now the appeals process is getting clogged up. So having the guards and the HSE and TUSLA and everybody else during this 7-day period is one thing, providing they have the resources to do so. I do think there is merit in having a unified database, providing that information is handled correctly, so that different asylum agencies across Europe and across the world even can talk to each other, and they can see, has this person gone from a country that has declined their application for whatever reason and has been consistently hopping from country to country to country. I can understand them wanting to do that, but they have to have the resources, the training, and the will to actually make this happen, rather than just going, no, 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 yeah, okay, they can go, no, 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 if you get what I mean.
So you'd be concerned that the decision-making process would be rushed and won't necessarily consider all the factors at play?
Yes. And again, this comes back to my argument that it's losing an awful lot of the individual nuance. Is that, people, not everyone fits into the same square box. And losing a lot of this nuance means that we're going to continue to see people falling through the cracks, people who are denied asylum, their applications denied, despite there being very genuine reasons that the application should be approved.
And it is something that they have been trialling at the City West for roughly the last year. There's been over 2,200 applications under the new transition system. And the Irish protection application system is being phased out while the EU Migration Pact comes in, and there will be a transient period where both systems will still be in place. So for example, if somebody has already made an application under the old Irish system, it will still be considered under those timelines. But I'm sure you'd acknowledge yourself, Simon, that the biggest issue facing our immigration system is the lengthy processing times, the lengthy appeals process, and that people are left in limbo, and that we even have situations where people are granted a deportation order and they're ordered to self-deport. They stay here, and a lot of the time there's very little, I suppose, oversight on where these people are, or any accountability from state agencies.
Yes, I would absolutely agree with that. And again, this comes down to the lack of adequate resources being put forward into the system. And, people do have failed applications. Their appeal fails. They're given orders to self-deport. Some do. You don't hear about that. Some do go back. But then others others vanish. And that creates its own issue, both from a legal standpoint and a humanitarian standpoint, because those are the people that fall through the cracks, and they end up, their national insurance numbers don't work. They have no access to social welfare. They're frightened if they report any kind of illegal activity that's committed against them to the authorities, it'll end up with them being deported. So these people are now becoming even more increasingly vulnerable because they're under the legal lines. They're at the very bottom in the quotation marks black market of society. So that again is a problem both for the state from a legal and from a bureaucratic point of view, but it's also a problem from a humanitarian point of view that these people are at extreme risk of exploitation, particularly women, and that is something that needs to be addressed as well. But again, it comes back, I feel, too much to a lack of resources, and this is a problem that has been ongoing for years. This is not something that's the fault of somebody who made a decision yesterday. This is something that's going on consistently in Ireland, where the processing of asylum applicants is taking such a long time. And I can give you an anecdotal piece of evidence from my own experience. There's a family that I've worked with from Nigeria. I have been working with them since pretty much the day I started working with the Clare Immigrant Support Centre. They were here 9 months. Their appeal was, their initial application was rejected. It's now on appeal and has been for the last 2.5 years, during which time they were told that they were no longer allowed to work. So they were working. They weren't claiming social welfare. But now that because they're on appeal, their work permits have been denied and shut down. So now they're just, for the last 2.5 years nearly, they're just sat in a direct provision centre, twiddling their thumbs, waiting for a final decision, and they're absolutely in limbo.